Um, the last time we heard, there was the blockade that America put out there around Iran's blockade. Um, and we saw that a Chinese ship was allowed through, or like America didn't stop a Chinese ship, which essentially, destroyed the idea of a blockade. But I don't know. We'll catch up. We'll see if the blockade's working now, if that was just a fluke that those Chinese ships got through. And maybe now it's working. And then also I know that we sent a bunch more troops to the Middle East. So let's go and watch this Morning Joe clip. Oh my God. I've talked about it before, but Morning Joe is potentially one of the most annoying shows that has ever existed. I think it might be the most annoying show, but you know what? They were one of the few ones I could find talking about the surge of troops to the Middle East. So we're going to watch them. Let's go ahead and listen to Morning Joe.
States military blockade of Iranian ports is now stretching into its third day as the White House continues its bid to put economic pressure on Tehran. U.S. Central Command said yesterday that no ships made it past the blockade in the first 24 hours, adding that 6 merchant vessels had complied with directions by radio from U.S. forces to turn around and re-enter Iranian ports, although it did not identify the ships or the ports. CENTCOM also noted the mission involves 10,000 American troops, more than a dozen warships, and an array of aircraft. As the Pentagon published,
AKA unsustainable. I don't even know why they release that stuff, to be honest, because all I hear is like, like all of my tax dollars being vacuumed out of my pocket every time I hear that, man. like that's not good. It shouldn't, like, why are we doing this? Please stop.
Publicly portrays confidence in the blockade. There are signals, however. Some ships may be testing the waters. The New York Times reports, citing ship tracking data, that one vessel under U.S. sanctions, the Chinese tanker Rich Starry, traveled eastward through the strait yesterday before turning around. Another Iran-linked ship also appeared to make it through the strait during the blockade, but the paper notes the vessel was offline yesterday, so it was not clear what its path had been. The Wall Street Journal cites 2 U.S. officials who say more than 20 commercial ships not linked to Iran have passed through the strait over the past day, a fraction of what it was before the war, but an improvement in flow through the critical waterway. Meanwhile,
yeah, so those ships, I mean, I don't know, maybe they're not associated with Iran, but I guarantee you that even if they were, associated with Iran or going through Iran ports and they made it through just like, testing the waters, America would say that it was, that they weren't, in order to save face. So I don't know, maybe they're actually enforcing it now. Who knows? It's really hard to tell because I don't trust anything our military says. I trust some of what the New York Times say if they're doing, analysis of the signals from the ships and stuff. So like to some extent I could see that, but I've also heard conflicting reports on this as well. So who knows, to be honest.
While the Washington Post reports the Pentagon is sending thousands of additional troops to the Middle East.
Also, I want to be clear. If it doesn't really matter. It's a non-issue because as soon as the war starts up again, which it likely will, they're just going to start like bombing ships and stuff. Like they're going to, any ship that doesn't go through their toll system is going to be bombed. If America is still implementing a blockade and not getting, missile struck all the time, like if they're far enough away that they're not getting constantly struck with missiles, then America is just going to tell them to turn around and then it'll just be completely empty, at which point Iran is going to blow up all of the Gulf state oil capacity so that nobody's getting out of the strait. So like, you know what I'm saying? It's really like, this is something that I think America can only do while they have this ceasefire. I think that once the ceasefire ends, it just goes back to a kinetic battle, just like it was before. And the blockade is irrelevant except for being more targets for Iran to hit.
In the coming days, according to U.S. officials who spoke to the Post, the move is designed to pressure Iran into a deal. The Trump administration is still considering additional strikes or possible ground operations if the ceasefire does not hold.
So my guess, and I always say this, is trust the ground movements more than what the U.S. is saying. Um, what usually happens is there is some sort of like, they like there's some sort of reporting that comes out of like, oh, they have made some sort of breakthrough, right? There's been a breakthrough, and America and Iran are on the same page. And then, right after that is when America usually strikes. When they kind of like pretend like they are being serious about negotiations and pretend that there's a breakthrough, and then they usually strike again. And so I would be on the lookout for that, but trust the troop movements. If the troops are going there, that means it's likely that they're going to engage in more either airstrikes or potentially a ground invasion of some sort. So, but I don't really know. We'll see what happens, but that's my gut is leaning towards where this conflict is going to restart again pretty soon. And this was just an opportunity to rearm all of America's ships and to rearm Israel and to get, pull as many defense interceptors from all of our other allies and move them to the actual ally, which is Israel.
Current and former officials tell the paper about 6,000 more troops will be added to the already assembled 50,000 personnel in the region. That all comes as behind-the-scenes talks to set up more in-person negotiations between the United States and Iran continue. President Trump said yesterday negotiations could resume over the next 2 days, possibly being held once again in Pakistan's capital. So, Joe, let's talk about the blockade, what these developments mean, and then we'll get to the issue of troops heading there.
Well, talking to people in the region yesterday, U.S. allies said, again, may have been reluctant originally for us to go to war, but after we went to war saying we've got to finish the job, there was a growing unease.
Hey, David. Yeah, doing pretty good today. There hasn't been a ton of new stuff from the war, from what I can tell. We're like the blockade is still, on, and we're sending more troops over there. I don't think anything has happened in terms of negotiating or anything, though. So we're just watching them talk about the new troops right now, the new troops being sent out there.
That the United States was going to get a bad deal in Islamabad. There was a growing unease that the president may come home, bring the troops home before getting the job done. They are actually very positive about the blockade and have signed on to what I am sure historians will long remember as the Haas plan. The Richard Haas plan, who Richard 10 days ago started saying it's all or nothing. You either let all of the ships go in and out of the strait, or you let none of them go out. They believe the dynamics have changed radically, and that Iran went from having time on their side to Iran now.
See, this is what I said would happen as well, is that America is going to completely, like, they're going to think that this actually somehow changes the fundamental issues on the ground. And it's why I also said that it wasn't the best move for Iran to even agree to a temporary cessation of like missile strikes, because America is going to interpret that the way it always interprets everything, as capitulation. And then they're going to, pretend like they're like I said, this blockade thing is not that big of a deal. And as soon as the actual kinetic war starts up again, it's not going to change anything. And so we are actually in the same position that we were before. It's just there's this cessation of firing that makes America feel a little bit overconfident right now. And Trump in particular, I think, feel confident, but as soon as it starts back up again, though, I think that we'll be back to where it was. It's also why I said that Iran agreeing to this ceasefire may not have been the best thing to do for it strategically in terms of getting the best outcome they possibly can from a negotiations perspective, and why I think China may have played a pretty big role in getting them to even stop their missile strikes for the time being. So. But America is like, I think it's clear that America is going to overplay its hand and what it thinks it deserves in this ceasefire, and only the battlefield, like seeing the results on the battlefield is going to be the only way to show America like what reality is.
Understanding they are going to have to eventually come to a deal because, as we've always said from the beginning of this war, the military targets have been hit in Iran, a good number of them. But economically, Iran was doing better, trading oil and moving their oil across the globe and getting good money for it than they had in years. That's now changed. So the attitude, not only inside the administration, but also among a lot of Gulf allies now is they're degraded radically when it comes to their military operations. And now they're really starting to feel the heat economically if the United States, they say, will continue the blockade.
It's a temporary, like, even if they're telling the truth and that they are stopping any oil shipments to China or whatever. For one, that's a diplomatic relations issue for China as well. They're going to want that, they're going to want that oil coming through. So there's that aspect. But then they're just, this is why, like, America gets so overconfident from even the slight idea of a like performative victory, and that this I think might play, like, people might think of this, be able to convince themselves that this is some sort of victory. We'll see when the missiles start flying again. We'll see how much of a victory it is. Those ships are going to make great target practice, I'm sure. Those blockade ships are going to make great target practice for the Iranian missiles. But yeah, I don't know. And Joe and I forgot her name. They're very hawkish as well. So take that in as it, like, for what their bias is. They are very like pro-Iran war in general and pro-war in general. So Mika, that's her name, I think. So yeah, take that in mind as well when they're talking about this.
A lot of other things happening. Let's bring in contributing editor at the Financial Times, Kim Gattaz. Kim, we can talk about the blockade. We can talk about the troops coming in, but of course, what is also fascinating is direct talks now between Lebanon and Israel. Tell us about that, the prospects of it, and if it may bring an end to the suffering that's going on in your country.
Good morning, Joe. Great to be.
I have a video on that from yesterday, so I kind of want to skip ahead to where they talk about the troop deployment. So if you care about my opinion on those negotiations, big picture is I think it's a sham. It's not going to turn into any sort of lasting peace. But I assumed that Chiron would change, but I guess not. This all looks like Lebanon, so let's try over here maybe.
Kim, the next question I ask is going to sound like a leading question. It is not a leading question. I'm just curious. We see these strikes against apartments. We see these strikes against residential.
Okay, this seems like more Lebanon stuff. So maybe they don't talk about the troop deployment anymore, from what I can tell. But yeah, my guess is that, like I said, the troop deployment indicates to me that they're going to restart this war. And like I said, it usually comes after a breakthrough. Like if there's a news of like some sort of breakthrough or something in the media, or like in terms of negotiations where US is pretending to be to come back to the table for realsies or whatever, then that's when it usually happens, is when we usually strike them.